There was once a young man named Sienkai, who was a descendant of the samurai lineage, but he was born in a remote village. As he grew up, he desired to make progress in the capital city, Edo, the old name for Tokyo in Japan, during the time of Tokugawa shogunate. Being a clever and quick-witted boy, he was selected to serve closely to a nobleman. After a while, the wife of the nobleman, who had an ill heart, conspired to use the young man to satisfy her desires. Sienkai fell into this trap and committed a mistake that changed his life forever. One night, the nobleman caught them in the act. Enraged, he drew his samurai sword that was hanging nearby, intending to kill Sienkai immediately. However, in his anger, his strikes were wild and uncontrolled. Sienkai, realizing that he was in grave danger, picked up a chair and anything else he could find to fend off the attack. He managed to avoid the strikes, and as the situation escalated, the nobleman's wife realized that she had lost control. She decided to spare Sienkai and ended up impaling her husband with the sword instead. With her husband dead, the nobleman's wife instructed Sienkai to flee the house with her. So, they escaped together under the cover of night. After going through challenging times, Sienkai found himself in a situation he had never imagined. He was now the husband of the nobleman's wife, but they had to hide and live a life on the run, where there was no opportunity to thrive. Sienkai reflected on his predicament and realized that controlling one's thoughts was crucial to maintaining a correct path. He understood that external factors, such as environment, appearance, sound, smell, and taste, can influence thoughts greatly. He recognized that these circumstances couldn't be avoided completely, but he could control his reaction to them. He decided to donate his position and leave the nobleman's wife, seeking refuge in a distant place. He arrived at a temple in a faraway village and became a disciple of the teachings of Buddhism. He learned that mastering one's thoughts and reactions was the key to overcoming the challenges of life. He recognized that individuals are susceptible to the influences of their surroundings and experiences, but they can find solace in a safe environment that encourages positive thinking. Sienkai pondered deeply about this lesson and looked back at his past. He realized that he had been misled by his own thoughts and the environment he found himself in. He understood that the path to victory over adversity lay in controlling his mind and not succumbing to base desires. In his pursuit of this knowledge, he found a new path that led him to peace and enlightenment within the teachings of Buddhism. Once he had embraced Buddhism and reformed himself, he often found himself reflecting on the past. Back when he used to wander in pity for himself, he carried the burden of his past mistakes. Venerable Seengai felt compelled to atone for the wrongdoings of his previous life by confessing his sins and performing virtuous deeds. He resolved to do beneficial acts until his last breath. The village where he resided was nestled amidst the rugged mountains, connected to the nearby province by a narrow path winding along the steep cliffs. This path became impassable during heavy rain, snowfall, or strong winds. The villagers were impoverished and harbored resentment due to their isolation. It was a small, remote district adjacent to the province, accessible only by a treacherous walkway along the towering mountain rocks. Every year, numerous people fell to their deaths while attempting to cross the treacherous path, succumbing to the challenges of the journey. Venerable Seengai pondered the hardships of the villagers and the human condition as a whole. Despite their physical proximity, they remained separated by the challenging terrain. He saw the disparities between them and realized that this situation couldn't continue indefinitely. There was only one solution: to tunnel through the mountain. He recognized that if no action was taken, the circumstances would persist, leaving no choice but to address the issue. However, he knew that sharing such thoughts with others would likely lead to disagreement. Thus, he resolved to initiate the task himself. Early mornings were spent collecting alms, while the rest of his time was dedicated to tirelessly working on the tunnel. He remained undeterred, even in the face of darkness. For years, he worked alone, slowly chipping away at the mountain rocks. The path was arduous, but his dedication and determination surpassed the strength of the stones. No one knew where he drew the resilience and motivation to carry on. Over 30 years passed, and Venerable Seengai, once a young man, continued to carve the tunnel. His body was now in his 50s, but his spirit was stronger than the rocks. The source of his unwavering determination and strength remained a mystery to the villagers. His actions garnered admiration, and he gained a reputation as an individual who transcended the limits of human capability. The tunnel was finally completed through the massive mountain. People began to visit and use the passage, establishing a connection between the isolated district and the bustling city. The once treacherous journey became more accessible. The task that Venerable Seengai had embarked upon had transformed the region. The initial skepticism of the villagers had given way to progress and prosperity. Continuing the story, before the completion of the tunnel and the possibility of passing through it 2 years prior. During that time, there was a man named Soma who quietly came from the city. Later, it was revealed that he was the son of the Lord who used to rule over Venerable Seengai. When Soma's father was murdered, he was still very young. As he grew up, he carried the burden of sorrow. He traveled and investigated for many years. When Soma became skilled in swordsmanship and gained confidence, he decided to come forward to take action and seek revenge. Despite his desire for vengeance, Soma was conflicted by the realization that Venerable Seengai had become a revered monk. To avoid a sinful act, he confronted Venerable Seengai and disclosed his intention. Venerable Seengai calmly listened and acknowledged Soma's pain. He then explained his vision for the tunnel, a project that would benefit the entire community. Venerable Seengai requested that Soma assist him in completing the tunnel, and in return asked for his life. Soma agreed, recognizing the importance of the project for the greater good. In the beginning, Soma was still unsure if he could trust someone who had once killed his father. He had to be on guard at all times, carrying a sword and a dagger, constantly circling around the campfire to make sure that Venerable Seengai wouldn't escape or tamper with time, slowing down the passage of time by carving rocks slowly. After several encounters and moments of observation, Venerable Seengai seemed to work tirelessly, day and night. Soma was intrigued, and after months of hesitation, he finally invited Venerable Seengai to talk. They had many conversations over time, and eventually they became bonded. When Soma had nothing to do, he tried chipping away at rocks to help Venerable Seengai, and gradually they became companions, sharing meals and resting together in the campfire. In the end, Soma became a helpful assistant who knew how to work diligently, following Venerable Seenkai's guidance. They worked tirelessly without stopping, and time passed by for over a year without them even realizing it. During this time, the young man had emulated the virtues he had seen in Venerable Seengai. He discovered that Venerable Seengai was filled with extraordinary qualities and had a strong and compassionate heart beyond measure. Finally, the tunnel through the great mountain was successfully completed. People gathered to witness it and use it as a means to connect with the city, sparing them the arduous climb up the rocky slopes. Once it was done that day, Venerable Seengai turned his gaze towards Soma, who stood behind him, sharing in the achievement. Venerable Seengai spoke up, saying, "We've cut through the mountain, connecting people together. Now it's time for the neck that connects my head to my body to be severed, as per the agreement." After speaking, he bowed gracefully to Soma. Soma, with tears in his eyes, sank to his knees, both hands clasped in prayer. He hesitated and said, "How shall I sever the head of my own teacher?" And with that, the story concludes. Sienkai, despite making mistakes due to the circumstances that forced him, ultimately chose to live in the present, using his life for the benefit of others. As for Soma, he temporarily put aside the grudge in his heart, built a bridge to success, and completely erased the grudge from his heart. Making a mistake is something that happens to everyone, but introspection is something that only some people who can think can do.
Thank you for watching. May you have peace and prosperity, and may all your wishes come true.